My husband packed my AirPods for his golf trip, so I tracked them and detonated his secret double life. I was standing perfectly still in the middle of a breathless, chandelier-lit dining room, my thumb trembling as it hovered over the glowing screen of my iPhone. Less than 10 feet away, my husband of 4 years was raising a crystal glass of Cabernet to his lips, smiling over the rim at a striking blonde woman who was definitely not his wife. The morning had started with the mundane, agonizing frustration of a misplaced item. Marcus had left the house at 5 in the morning for what he had been calling his annual men's golf retreat. He had spent the entire week leading up to it meticulously polishing his clubs, laying out his overpriced pastel polo shirts, and complaining about the agonizing 6-hour drive to the resort in the neighboring state. I had kissed his cheek in the dark, pulled the duvet back over my shoulders, and fallen back asleep, blissfully unaware that my entire marriage was a meticulously crafted illusion. By 9 o'clock, the sun was streaming through the bedroom blinds, and I was tearing apart my gym bag. I had a spin class at 10, and my AirPods Pro were missing. I checked the nightstand, rummaged through the pockets of my leggings, and crawled on my hands and knees to peer under the bed frame. Nothing. The little white plastic case had vanished. My chest tightened with that familiar, petty annoyance. They were the expensive noise-cancelling ones, a birthday gift from my sister, and I absolutely refused to suffer through 45 minutes of intense cardio listening to the gym's royalty-free techno playlist. I grabbed my phone, swiped down, and opened the Find My app. I expected to see the little green dot hovering right over my home address, maybe pinpointing them out in the driveway where they could have slipped out of my pocket the night before. The map loaded. The grid of streets snapped into focus. My home was a blue dot. The AirPods were a green dot. But the green dot wasn't at my house. It wasn't even in my zip code. My brow furrowed as I pinched the screen, zooming out. The green dot was actively moving down Interstate 95. It was traveling at exactly 60 miles per hour. A heavy, confusing knot formed at the base of my throat. Marcus had taken them. In his rushed, early morning packing frenzy, he must have swept them off the kitchen counter, mistaking my case for his. I tapped his contact name and sent a quick text. Hey, did you accidentally grab my AirPods? Find My says they are on the highway. I set the phone down and went to the kitchen to pour a cup of coffee, assuming he would call me from the road to apologize. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The silence in the house began to feel thick, suffocating. I picked up my phone again. No text back. I opened the app just to see how far he had gotten, expecting to see him crossing the state line heading north toward the famous golf course he had been bragging about for weeks. The green dot had diverted. It wasn't heading north. It had taken the exit heading east, toward the coast. Toward the wine country. I sat down on one of the kitchen stools. The ceramic coffee mug felt incredibly heavy in my hand. I watched the screen. The dot crept along the digital highway, taking turns, navigating through the coastal backroads. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there was a detour. Maybe the guys wanted to stop for an early lunch. I hit refresh. The screen blinked, and the dot came to a hard, permanent stop. The location address popped up at the bottom of the screen. It read, The Whispering Pines Luxury Spa and Winery. A cold, prickly sensation started at the base of my neck and rushed all the way down to my fingertips. My stomach dropped into my shoes. Whispering Pines wasn't a golf course. It was an ultra-exclusive, obscenely expensive romantic retreat for couples. It was the kind of place that had private soaking tubs overlooking the vineyards and couples' massage pavilions. It was exactly 2 hours away from our house. My phone vibrated in my palm, nearly making me jump out of my skin. A text message from Marcus lit up the lock screen. Hey babe. Sorry, terrible reception up here at the lodge. I didn't grab your AirPods, I'm looking at mine right now. You probably left them in your car. Just hit the first tee box with the guys. Gonna be away from my phone for a few hours. Love you. I read the words 3 times. My vision tunneled until nothing existed but the glaring white text bubble on my screen. He was lying. He was lying with an ease and a fluency that absolutely terrified me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt the heat rising in my neck, my jaw clenching so hard my teeth ached, and my vision went blurry with pure, unadulterated rage. I didn't bother changing out of my gym clothes. I grabbed my car keys, my wallet, and stormed out the front door. The engine of my SUV roared to life, and I slammed the gearshift into drive. The 2-hour drive was a masterclass in psychological torture. I kept the app open on the passenger seat, the screen glowing like a beacon in my peripheral vision. Every mile marker that blurred past my window felt like a physical blow. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were stark white. I spent the first hour running through every conversation we had over the last 6 months. The late nights at the office. The sudden interest in upgrading his wardrobe. The way he would place his phone face down on the coffee table. The red flags hadn't just been waving, they had been draped over my eyes, and I had chosen to ignore them. That's when the real bombshell dropped. I was sitting at a long red light about 40 miles outside of the winery, the silence in the car ringing in my ears. I needed absolute proof. I grabbed the synced iPad I had thrown into the passenger seat, the one linked to our shared iCloud. I bypassed the lock screen and opened his email app. I typed Whispering Pines into the search bar. Instantly, a reservation confirmation popped up. It was dated 3 weeks ago. Thank you for booking the anniversary vineyard suite, Mr. Thorne. We look forward to welcoming you and your guest. Your couple's aromatherapy massage is scheduled for 1 p.m., followed by a private tasting in our reserve cellar. The total charge was $4,500. Billed to a credit card ending in 4491. A card I didn't even know existed. He wasn't just having a fling. He was funding a secret double life while telling me we needed to stick to a tight budget to save for a down payment on a new house. The bile rose in the back of my throat, bitter and acidic. I swallowed it down, pressed my foot hard onto the accelerator, and ran the red light. By the time the massive wrought iron gates of Whispering Pines came into view, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I bypassed the line of idling Porsches and Mercedes waiting for the valet, aggressively parallel parked my muddy SUV between 2 immaculate sports cars, and killed the engine. I stepped out onto the crushed gravel. The air smelled intensely of blooming jasmine and expensive cedarwood. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The green dot was right on top of me. I tapped the icon. The app transitioned to the precision finding screen. The screen turned a soft, pulsing green, displaying an arrow pointing directly toward the massive glass double doors of the main lodge. 150 feet away. I walked through the entrance. The lobby was a cathedral of vaulted wooden ceilings, roaring stone fireplaces, and ambient jazz music. A hostess in a sleek black dress stepped into my path, offering a practiced, perfectly white smile. Welcome to Whispering Pines. Do you have a reservation for the dining room, I didn't even look at her. I walked right past the podium, my eyes glued to the screen in my hand. 80 feet away. I moved past a sweeping mahogany bar where couples were clinking champagne flutes. My chest was heaving, but my footsteps were completely silent against the plush carpeting. 40 feet away. The arrow pointed straight ahead, leading me to the entrance of the primary dining room. It was an airy, sun-drenched space enclosed entirely in glass, overlooking miles of rolling green vineyards. The room was hushed, filled with the soft murmur of intimate conversations and the delicate clinking of silverware against fine china. 20 feet away. I lowered the phone. I didn't need the arrow anymore. I saw him. Marcus was sitting at a corner table bathed in natural light. He was wearing the crisp, light blue linen button-down I had ironed for him yesterday. Sitting across from him was a woman with cascading blonde hair, wearing a white silk slip dress that clung to her perfectly tanned shoulders. Resting on the empty chair beside her was a pale pink, meticulously structured designer handbag. I stood by a large potted ficus tree, completely frozen, watching my husband. He reached across the white tablecloth and gently tucked a stray blonde curl behind her ear. His face was soft, attentive, utterly devoted. It was the exact same look he had given me on our wedding day. The absolute betrayal of that gesture snapped whatever last thread of restraint I was holding on to. I looked down at my phone. I pressed the play sound button. A high-pitched, electronic chirping noise erupted through the quiet dining room. Chirp, chirp, chirp. It was piercing. It was rhythmic. It cut through the soft jazz and the murmuring voices like a fire alarm. Several heads at the nearby tables turned, eyes scanning the room for the source of the obnoxious noise. I watched Marcus look around, a polite look of annoyance crossing his face. Then, the blonde woman frowned. She leaned over, unclasped the gold hardware of her pale pink designer bag, and began rummaging through it. The sound was coming from inside her purse. "What is that?" she muttered, her perfectly manicured fingers digging through lipsticks and compacts. I stepped out from behind the tree. I walked slowly, deliberately, my sneakers silent on the hardwood floor. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I felt like a ghost floating toward the table. "Is it your phone?" Marcus asked her, leaning forward, oblivious to the fact that his executioner was currently standing 3 feet behind his chair. "It's not a phone," I said. My voice was terrifyingly calm. It echoed in the small space between our table and the next. Marcus froze. I watched the muscles in his back go entirely rigid beneath his linen shirt. He turned his head in agonizing slow motion. When his eyes met mine, every single drop of blood violently drained from his face, leaving him looking like a freshly exhumed corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" he hissed, his eyes darting frantically around the silent restaurant, terrified of the scene that was unfolding. "Oh, I haven't even started making a scene, Marcus," I whispered, my voice dripping with pure venom. I stepped right up to the edge of the table. "Excuse me, who are you?" the blonde demanded, her perfectly glossed lips pulling into a confused sneer. "And how do you know my boyfriend?" "Boyfriend," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes entirely locked on the pale, sweating face of the man I had shared a bed with for 4 years. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The noise continued to blare from her open purse. I reached down, my hand brushing past her wrist, and plunged my fingers into the expensive leather bag. My hand closed around the familiar, smooth plastic of my AirPods case. I pulled it out and held it up between us. I clicked the button on my phone, and the chirping immediately stopped. The sudden silence at the table was deafening. "I'm the wife," I smiled, though I knew my eyes were dead. "And these belong to me." The blonde woman's jaw unhinged. She looked from me, to the AirPods, and then to Marcus, who was visibly trembling, his hands flat against the white tablecloth. "Isabella, please, let's just go outside and talk about this." "I can explain," he begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine. He started to push his chair back. "Don't stand up," I commanded. My tone was so sharp, so absolute, that he froze halfway out of his seat and slowly sank back down. I looked at the crystal glass of Cabernet resting inches from his hand. I reached to my left hand. With one fluid motion, I gripped my diamond engagement ring and the matching white gold wedding band. I pulled them over my knuckle. The metal felt heavy, laden with 4 years of lies, fake golf trips, and secret credit cards. I held the rings directly over his wine glass. "You forgot your golf clubs, Marcus," I said. I opened my fingers. The 2 rings plummeted into the dark red wine with a heavy, wet clink, sending a splash of Cabernet spotting across the immaculate white tablecloth and directly onto his crisp blue shirt. I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel and walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I marched straight through the mahogany lobby, out the heavy glass doors, and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. The adrenaline carried me all the way to my SUV. I got in, locked the doors, and the second the engine turned over, a singular, massive, shuddering breath tore its way out of my lungs. My phone was already lighting up with a barrage of desperate phone calls and frantic text messages, the screen flashing his name over and over again. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I put the car in reverse, pulled out of the luxury resort, and began the long drive home to pack his things in garbage bags. Am I the monster here for hunting him down and publicly humiliating him, or did he get exactly the detonation he deserved?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, Then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.